All right, let's put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page on the conclusion of the 24-25 college basketball season. I am here in my hotel room in San Antonio in a couple of hours. I'm going to be heading to the airport to get boots on the ground in New York City, where we will start looking ahead towards next season, but want to dissect, digest, and offer some perspective on what I just witnessed, what you just witnessed at the Alamo Dome, Florida winning the 2025 national championship over Houston 65-63 in an epic college basketball national championship game. Want you to hit the subscribe button. I also want you to get in the chat because I want to make sure that I'm taking all of your questions here as we get you set for obviously what happened, what's going to happen in the future. I'm also going to go through, at least for now, my preliminary edition of my early rankings for next season. These are going to change not just daily, but also hourly. So I want to continue to get obviously your thoughts on everything that happened tonight in the national championship game, and also dive into what's going to happen next season, as well as talk about some news and notes from around the world of college basketball that are going on right now with the transfer portal. But now, first, I want to get to three big things. And the first thing I want to get to is just how the 2025 Final Four did not disappoint. And I think there was a narrative throughout the NCAA tournament that this tournament lacked a little flavor, that this tournament was a little disappointing, that this tournament did not live up to the billing of what past NCAA tournaments have obviously come to the forefront with. And this is what I want to say to that. And I want to make sure that I hit this right off the top. I've been doing this now about 20 years. 20 years. I have never covered a Final Four with three games as good as the ones that we just saw in San Antonio. And now you start to dissect things a little bit more, and you look at what happened game by game. Florida was trailing Auburn at the half on Saturday in the national semifinals. Florida won the game. Houston was down and in the depths of despair on Saturday against Duke, came back and had one of the most epic comebacks that we have seen in the history of the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. And then tonight, Florida, where its star player Walter Clayton Jr., and we'll get to him in a second, was struggling against Houston for the majority of 35 minutes, found a way to be a little bit more resilient and come back and give the Gators their first national championship since Billy Donovan won the second installment of a back-to-back title in 2007. So I want to make this really, really clear. I have not seen in my lifetime a Final Four that was better in terms of the quality of the three games than the Final Four that we just witnessed. And that starts and obviously is directly related to the resiliency of the national champion Florida Gators. Against Texas Tech, Florida's down 10 points, came back and won the game. Against Auburn, Florida's down 9 points, came back and won the game. And then tonight, or last night, the wires are getting crossed right now as it's 12:28 a.m. in San Antonio. Houston, up 12 points, in control, relinquishes a lead, and Florida, who for all intents and purposes looked dead in the water again, came back and found a way to win the national championship. And that's going to bring me to my second part of my three big things, and that's Walter Clayton Jr., a player that shined brighter than any other guard in the NCAA tournament, was in a situation where he made the biggest plays for Florida to clinch a national title by not scoring. And on Saturday, when Florida beat Auburn to advance to the national title game, Walter Clayton Jr. was the elite of the elite on offense. His 34-point performance was the most points scored in a Final Four game since Danny Ferry scored 34 for Duke against Seton Hall in 1989. And then 2 days later, Walter Clayton Jr., who again struggled for the majority of the game and only finished with 11 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds, even though he was elite down the stretch, his biggest biggest play of the game was the defense that he played on Emmanuel Sharp in the closing seconds on the final possession. Houston struggled mightily down the stretch to execute. Houston struggled mightily down the stretch to get offense going when it mattered most. But Walter Clayton, a guy who, again, I had talked about all weekend as the guard who had made as many clutch shots for the first time in the NCAA tournament since we saw Shabazz Napier do it for UConn 11 years ago in 2014. His defining play in the NCAA tournament was not on offense. It was the defense that he played on Emmanuel Sharp on the closing play. And Houston, a team that was in firm position to win a national championship, did not even get a shot off. That was Walter Clayton Jr. And he then took Florida to a place that, again, it had not been since 2007 with Billy Donovan. And I think when you look now at the totality of everything, and I think this is really, really important to look at from a context perspective, in the last 31 years, 3 different head coaches, Lon Kruger, Billy Donovan, and Todd Golden now had won the right to play in the Final Four as Florida's head coach. But I wondered for a very, very long time, was Florida truly a great program, or was Florida being led by a steward in Billy Donovan, who was a Hall of Fame coach and obviously an outlier? I know that they went in 94 under Lon Kruger, but I think things were different. Todd Golden answered that bell. Todd Golden is the guy that now puts Florida back in the blue blood conversation. And when you look at things now from a national championship perspective, with the victory tonight over Houston, Florida earned its 3rd national championship. Villanova also has 3. These are the programs that have more than 3 national championships. Kansas has 4. Indiana has 5. Duke has 5. North Carolina and UConn have 6. Kentucky 8 and UCLA 11. Florida now, if it's not a blue blood, is pretty close. And because of Walter Clayton Jr., because of Todd Golden, we now have the Gators back on the stage as being recognized as one of the truly elite programs in college basketball. And here's the thing that mesmerizes me. Todd Golden, 39 years old, is the youngest head coach to win a national championship since Jim Valvano did it for NC State in 1983. And here's another thing that's incredible. Until this year, Todd Golden had never won an NCAA tournament game as a head coach, and this group of players on Florida had never won an NCAA tournament game together. It's not anarchy. It's just college basketball. But Florida, the most resilient team that we have seen in quite some time to win a national championship. Down 10 against Texas Tech. Down 9 in the national semifinals against Auburn. And down 12 tonight to Houston. And what can you say about Houston? And I want to talk about the Cougars now for a while because this is just a beautiful program. It's a beautiful, obviously, asset for college basketball. But my heart breaks tonight for Houston, especially Emmanuel Sharp, who, again, was such a vital part of this run for Houston over the last couple of months. But in the last minute of tonight's game against Florida, continually came up short. Emmanuel Sharp had a turnover late in the game tonight. He also had a turnover with about a minute left. And Emmanuel Sharp also is in a situation where he did not even get a shot off to have a chance to either tie or win the game for the Cougars. But this, again, is the other side of things. You've heard me on television. You've obviously read on social media. In March, there's the dark side of March. The dark side of April might be even darker. And my heart breaks for Emmanuel Sharp. My heart breaks for Kelvin Sampson and Kellen Sampson. Guys that were within inches of winning a national championship. And this, to me, is something that is somewhat similar to what we saw on Saturday when Duke blew the lead and lost to Houston. I said on Saturday night that this loss reminded me of when Wisconsin in 2015 had a 9-point lead against Duke in the national championship game, with Frank Kaminsky, the National Player of the Year, on its roster, and it lost the game. And you say to yourself, if you're a Wisconsin fan, when are we going to be back in that situation? When are we going to have a scenario where we are going to have a 9-point lead in the second half with the National Player of the Year on our roster? And then I said Saturday night, when is Duke going to have a 9-point lead with 3 minutes to go in a national semifinal and then be in a situation where you have a generational talent on your team as well and you lose the game? And if you're Kelvin Sampson, you're Houston, and you've been knocking at the door and you're this close to winning it all, you may never again be as close as you were tonight. And for that staff, who are such good people, regular people, people's people, your heart breaks. It's a very, very bitter pill to swallow for Houston. But this is part of it. If you're going to have the euphoria that you had on Saturday, you are going to have to deal with the other side of things. And the other side is the dark side of March. Later in this show, I'm going to go through my first rendition of the Rothstein 45 for next season. I will also post it in the morning so you can get a full breakdown of everything. It's going to change daily. I'm going to update it daily. But first, I want to hear from you. I want you to get in the chat. I want you to send me your questions. I am here for you. Think of me right now as like Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting. You are sitting on the couch. You're a Houston fan, you want to vent. You're a Florida fan, you want to vent. I'm going on fumes right now. This is like the Seinfeld episode when Jerry Seinfeld, and a lot of people here might be too young to obviously know Seinfeld, but it's like the episode when Kramer had the Kenny Rogers light coming through his apartment and he's on fumes, because that's what's going on. We just did a show on CBS Sports Network. I wrote a column. I'm editing my 45. We've got plenty to get to. We're going to go through some news and notes later. But right now, your questions in the chat are next. Jon Rothstein concluding the 24-25 college basketball season right here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page.
This is what you were made for.
And we're back. Let's get to our questions now as the stream and the chat is on fire. John says, I feel awful for Sharp. He's going to remember that for the rest of his life. Johnny, I hear you, man. I feel the same way as you do, because I think of Emmanuel Sharp and I think about other players who have made mistakes in the championship game of the NCAA tournament. First thing I thought about was Freddie Brown in Georgetown in 1982 when he threw the ball to the wrong man. This is what you have to deal with in the NCAA tournament. This is what you have to deal with when you're in a situation where you have the dark side of April. All right, Andrew Schaefer wants to know, John, will Kelvin Sampson ever get back to this moment? 69 years old, not much time left. Look, I don't want to tease obviously what I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes here with my rankings, but if Kelvin Sampson can retain the guys that have eligibility, Houston could be right back in the spot next year and have a chance to win. I have no doubt about that. No doubt about that. He's built the flagship program in the Big 12, and he's built a program that, again, is one of the best in college basketball. Next year, Houston can be back here, but you need so many things to go right to win a national championship. I was doing an event, I think it was 2008. It was in San Antonio, same city, and I was hosting an event with Denny Crum, the famous Louisville coach, and he said, John, to win a national championship, you got to be lucky. You also can't be unlucky. So many things don't come into play when you're trying to win it all. So many things. I'm getting a little verklempt right here, so just excuse me as I chug my water. Let's see here. Jonathan Teal says, John, I said before today that we needed a Will Richard masterclass. Can we talk about how great he was tonight? Look, Will Richard was silent the last two games for Florida. He was violent tonight for the Gators. 18 points, 8 rebounds. He loosened up the offense in the first half. You started to obviously see him be really at the epicenter for Florida when the Gators were able to get back into the game. No way does Florida win the national championship tonight without Will Richard. Okay, right here from the chat, the CBS Sports College Basketball tag wants to know, John, is Florida blue blood? I said this in our first block. They're really, really close. Just like Villanova is really, really close. Now, Villanova has tapered off, obviously, since Jay Wright retired. But Florida's really, really close to being a blue blood. Really, really close. I don't know if they're there yet. I think of blue bloods is different. I mean, look, we say UCLA is a blue blood program. UCLA has won one national title since John Wooden in 1995 with Jim Herrick. That is 30 years ago. And UCLA has been to the Final Four 4 times since, 3 times with Ben Allen, 1 time with Mick Cronin. But now, I think if you're talking about the blue blood programs in the sport, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, UConn, for sure. There's different layers to blue bloods. I think you have to win multiple championships in recent years, or at least within memory, to be considered a blue blood. But that's just me. Let's see what else we got here from our active people in the chat. Let's see. Okay, Jackson Eeps wants to know, John, when we can sleep. Well, I'm not sleeping tonight, I'll tell you that much. I hope I can sleep in May. But look, I love college basketball as much as anybody, but I am pumped right now to finish out this show, to get on the bird, to get home to New York. I have been saving myself for a really, really big-time cheat meal. And Friday night, I've got a reservation at this place in the West Village for Charles. As good American food as you're going to have in your life. The French dip, the burger, the carbonara, all of it. I have a reservation. For some reason, I've been in a situation, and this is somebody who has always battled, obviously, especially as I'm now in my 40s, putting on LBs. I haven't been able to work out, go to the gym or anything during March Madness. I am considerably thinner than I've ever been. It is amazing how that happens. Today, when I was getting dressed, I was on my 4th loop of my belt. That has never happened before. Now, I know part of it is your calorie intake isn't there, but I have not been active. I have not been anything. But the Peronis, the snacks, all of this is coming. All of it is coming. Let's see who we got right now as we take some more questions right here. Jon Rothstein on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. Ian Ricks wants to know, John, at the end of the day, was the SEC the best conference of all time? I think it was. I think when you look at what the SEC accomplished, 14 teams in the NCAA tournament, 2 in the Final Four, 1 in the national title game. We have never seen this type of volume before. We have never seen that type of volume in the NCAA tournament, 14 out of 16. And I don't know if we're ever going to see it again. Again, I want you to smash that like button. I want you to subscribe. We're getting going right here again. We've been doing the show a couple of weeks. We're going to have a different cadence laid out for you in the off season as we continue to try and get this show off the ground. I'm so excited to have everything right now in my portfolio under the CBS Sports umbrella. We're going to continue to bring you great content. We're going to go through my top 45 here in just a second, but want to continue to take more of your questions in the chat. John Justix wants to know, John, do you think Duke loses their whole starting 5? You know, I try not to speculate on speculation here at this time of year, but I will say this. Nothing surprises me anymore with the transfer portal. Nothing surprises me with the NBA draft. Now, Duke has players in its program that have remaining eligibility and returning experience. Tyrese Proctor, Caleb Foster, guys like that. It's going to be real important for not just Duke, but for so many programs right now to be in a situation where they try to retain as many of their core players as possible. And Florida and Houston are the perfect examples of that. Florida and Houston, okay, are 2 examples of the importance of retention. 13 of the 16 players that Florida and Houston played on Saturday in the national semifinals were in those respective programs last year. Retention deserves more attention. What else deserves attention right now? My 45 for next year. I want to preface it, and I'm going to get into it in a second, but this 45 is going to change. This 45 is going to be moving and shaking and being switched around probably hourly over the next couple of months. But I want to give you a sneak peek. We're going to get into that when we return. Jon Rothstein here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page.
She knows, and I know she knows.
All right, when I release this on Tuesday morning, which is this morning, I always preface it with this statement. These rankings will be updated daily throughout the offseason. If a player is projected to be a first-round pick in the 2025 NBA draft, he will be projected as a key loss. If a player is not projected to be a first-round pick in the 2025 NBA draft and has not announced his public plans to turn professional, he will be projected to return to college basketball next season. Teams who have yet to put together a capable roster with at least 7 or 8 players will be withheld from these rankings until they do so. So let's get to these rankings. Houston is in the 1 spot. They're losing Cryer, Francis, Roberts, and Malik Wilson. And again, you'll be able to see all this off my social media. But Uzan, Sharp, Arsenault, and Tugler are expected to return. Chris Sinak is also going to be in the mix for the Cougars. Purdue's in the 2-hole. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Wren set to return. I've got Duke at 3. Alabama, and again, this is all in flux with what they're adding, returns several players, Aiden Sherrill, Darion Reed, Aiden Holloway from last year's team that, are this year's team that went to the Elite Eight. Michigan and Dusty May on the heels of a big-time portal class with Cadeau, Yaxel Lendeborg, and Merez Johnson is number 5. Roddy Gale and LJ Kaysen are also expected to return. Iowa State is at 6. Lipsy, Jefferson, Momchilovich set to return. I've got UCLA at 7 with the addition of Donovan Dent. Know that UCLA lost to Daimara, but this team won 23 games last year and did not have a capable point guard. Texas Tech is in the 8th spot. There's a lot of defections here, but my projection, which again will all be on social media with a link to click down a full breakdown on Tuesday. I have Texas Tech returning Christian Anderson, Kevin Overton, and JT Toppin. Michigan State's in the 9 spot. UConn, with the addition of Silas Demery Jr., is going to be at 10. Arizona 11. Auburn at 12. Auburn, again, has several players to get in the transfer portal. Keyshawn Hall from UCF committed last week. That's a big get for Bruce Pearl. Oregon, Florida, Kentucky, 13, 14, 15. Love what Kentucky is doing in the transfer portal so far with Jalen Lowe from Pitt and Mohamed Diabate from Alabama. St. John's, I'm going to get to later in more depth, but I have St. John's at 16 right now. Rick Pitino told me when I talked to him on Sunday, St. John's is still looking to add multiple guards in the portal, so you got to keep your eye on the Red Storm. BYU is 17. Arkansas is 18. Louisville, who has done a great job in the portal, is at 19. Tennessee's at 20. Wisconsin, Creighton, Ohio State, North Carolina, Mississippi State round out the top 25, but I do 45. Ed Cooley in Georgetown at 26. Then I go Missouri, San Diego State, Illinois, and Kansas. That takes us to 30. St. Mary's is 31, followed by Texas, Cincinnati, Kansas State, and Marquette at 35. USC, Baylor, Northwestern, TCU, and Gonzaga take us to 40. And then we go Notre Dame, Georgia, SMU, Nebraska, and LSU. So things are obviously in flux. There's a couple of teams there that have not fielded teams that I expect, obviously, to be in the mix. You're keeping your eye on Maryland with Buzz Williams. You're keeping your eye on Kevin Willard and Villanova. Obviously, Chris Beard is going to put together a team at Ole Miss. Obviously, Penny Hardaway is going to put together a team at Memphis. But again, Stay tuned every morning during the offseason. I am going to continue to update these rankings. Again, I think there's a dip after the first couple of teams, but one constant, as long as obviously everybody returns that's supposed to return, is that Purdue and Houston have the best semblance of returning personnel right now in college basketball. And I don't think that will be debated by anybody. I'm fully expecting Purdue and Houston to start next season 1-2, just based on the way things are going. Now, with the transfer portal, with portal combat, things can change in an instant. But for all intents and purposes, that's where we're going right now. Purdue and Houston at 1-2. Want to be in a situation, too, where I want to get your feedback and the interaction on these rankings for next season. Again, this will all be available in an article form Tuesday morning, but you just heard me go through the first edition of the Rothstein 45. I want you to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and I want to hear your thoughts in the chat about my 45. Jon Rothstein here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page.
This is what you were made for. I was made for this.
All right, I got a couple of questions coming in here. So I want to make sure I get to everything. Randy says, John, Kansas at 30 with the number 1 overall pick coming in is crazy. Well, it's not really crazy, Randy, because look at what Kansas had the last couple of years. Kansas is coming off the worst 2 years ever under Bill Self. Ever. First time ever under Bill Self that Kansas has lost double-digit games. It's the first time it's ever happened. Kansas's point guard, or projected point guard until they get another one, Marco Jackson, is coming off a year where he didn't play. Darren Peterson, I know, is a big-time talent. I know Trey White's a capable player, but this is still Kansas. And Kansas loses DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, Zeke Mayo. Not that those players were setting the world on fire. But I have such a hard time in this climate putting a lot of stock in teams that have not done things together. I'm not going to be in a situation where I'm going to anoint Kansas, at least not yet, higher than 30. Because for all intents and purposes, I'm looking at Kansas as a team that is a virtual unknown. Connor Collins says, John, Gonzaga at 40. This is what, and I want to go through right now why I have Gonzaga at 40. This is what the projected roster I have right now for Gonzaga, a team that desperately needs to hit the portal. Braden Smith, who redshirted a transfer from Colgate. Jalen Worley, a guy who transferred, was at Florida State, then at Virginia, now at Gonzaga. Steele Venters, who has not played in 2 years. Emmanuel Innocente, who was a role player last year, and Braden Huff. You lose Ryan Nembhard. You lose Nolan Hickman. Caleb Battle, Graham Ike, Ben Gregg, all gone. That's why Gonzaga is at 40. Pranav wants to know, John, why are you so high on Michigan State? I value returning personnel. So if Jeremy Fears is going to be back at point guard, and Jackson Kohler is going to be back up front, and Cone Carr is going to be back as a wild card, and you have Carson Cooper and Tom Izzo, that's good enough for me. I'd feel better if Trey Holloman was back. I'd feel better if Jace Richardson decided to come back. But this is the way I do things. If you're projected to be a first-round pick by the mock projections, I'm going to slot you in as going. And if you're 31 or after, I'm going to slot you in as coming back to school. That's the best way to do it. A slice of toast wants to know, John, could you see Michigan dipping if Yaxel Lendeborg leaves for the NBA? Yeah, I definitely could. I don't think, though, that Dusty May would leave Michigan shorthanded. I think they would get another big. But Dusty May has quickly proven that he can swiftly navigate the transfer portal. He got Elliot Cadeau and Morez Johnson in back-to-back days. Seamlessly got those guys to commit. And at least as of now, you're able to retain Roddy Gale and LJ Kaysen, a player who I think is going to have a big-time breakout a big-time breakout season next year. Michigan, just like Dusty May did last year, is put together like a team that's going to compete for a Big Ten championship. Will wants to know, John, what are your expectations for Sean Miller in his first year at Texas? Well, look, Sean Miller, I think, has done a pretty good job retaining some of the players that he went against in the NCAA tournament this year when he was coaching Xavier against Texas. Tremont Mark, Jordan Pope, Kendall Weaver is a really good nucleus for Sean Miller to build around next year. Dalen Swain, a player who I expect to break out next year, who played for Sean Miller at Xavier, was a big-time get. So those four give you a pretty strong nucleus of guys to build around for Sean Miller at Texas. But you're building for the year one in the SEC. And make no mistake about it, this is the golden age of SEC basketball. And with Texas's hire of Sean Miller, 9 of the sitting 16 head coaches in the SEC have at least been in the Elite Eight. 9. That may have changed now with Todd Golden being a national champion. Let me double check that while we're doing it live right here, just to make sure that I have that stat correct. I'm just going to look at the SEC standings real quick right now. But I know that it was 9 with Miller. It might be 10 now because Todd Golden obviously is a national champion. Because you look at the coaches in the SEC, just bear with me one sec. I just want to go through the SEC standings here at 1 o'clock in the morning. Miller, Calipari, Oates, Beard, Pearl, that's 5. Again, I'm trying to get these SEC standings up right now. It's the epitome of brutality. Okay, here we go. Pearl, Golden, Oates, Barnes. Buzz Williams is no longer in the league. Beard, Calipari, Mosier, Miller. So, yeah, we're looking right now. Let's see. 1, 2, Mike White is another one. So 9 of the 16 coaches in the SEC have at least coached in the Elite Eight. This is the golden era of SEC basketball. The golden era. Jordan Rich says, John, did you have Florida ranked? Elijah Martin and Richard are massive losses, but I think Aberdeen, an incoming transfer, and Houck is still a good starting 5. Well, look, this is what I did for Florida, and I spent some time, obviously, with the staff in San Antonio this week. Florida, and we'll see who comes back and so on and so forth here over the next couple of weeks, but you would project Aberdeen, Condon, Chinyelu, Houck to be back. Todd Golden is also, very high on Isaiah Brown. So I think Florida has a nucleus in place if it can get one more guard to be a real factor. A real factor. So everything that's happening right now for the Gators, I think that there's probably a guard short. Urban Clavshar is another guy who has experience being in Florida's program. Look, some of these guys are probably going to transfer. That's just what happens in college basketball. But I think if Florida can get back now who they need to get back, they're going to have a real shot to be in a situation where they can be a top 10, 15 team to start next season. Want to put a bow on this podcast when in return, I got some other news and notes from around the world of college basketball. Jon Rothstein here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. All right, I want to touch on a couple of transfer things here as we wrap up. I felt that Kentucky last year under Mark Pope did as good a job as any program in college basketball at allocating its money properly and making sure that it was building a team and not just accumulating talent. The Wildcats are doing the same thing so far this year. Mark Pope got an outstanding point guard from Pitt in Jalen Lowe, and earlier on Monday he received a commitment from a great utility player from Alabama in Muhammad Diabate. the pieces are starting to look like they're going to fit for Kentucky. And look, the pieces are going to change every single day. But you look at what this team obviously has returning next year, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic if you're a Kentucky fan. And Kentucky, I'm sure, is still going to be active in the transfer portal and continually active in the transfer portal. But look, here's the bottom line. If Kentucky can get guys back who still have returning eligibility, you got a nucleus in place before we're even looking at freshmen, where you've got Brandon Garrison, you've got Muhammad Diabate, you've got Colin Chandler, Otego Way, and Jalen Lowe. That's a pretty good place to start if you're Mark Pope right now, and it's only April the 8th. Now, Ian Jackson from North Carolina entered the transfer portal on Monday, and according to multiple sources, one school that's going to be firmly in the mix for Ian Jackson is St. John's. And St. John's, to me, is a program that is going to be real interesting to watch with the transfer portal over the next couple of weeks. St. John's made major headlines by getting Josan Sannon from Arizona State, by getting Bryce Hopkins from Providence. Rick Pitino was at the Naismith Awards breakfast on Sunday, and he told me St. John's needs 2 more guards. I can tell you what I know. St. John's is going to be firmly in the mix for Ian Jackson. St. John's also, according to other sources that I've talked to, is going to be right there in the mix with Xavion Lee from Princeton. I think you could see Duke and Florida also in play for Lee. And I know that Isaiah Sellers from Stanford is going to be taking a visit to St. John's this weekend. If St. John's can get 2 of those guards or even 3 of those guards, you're looking at a top 5 to 16 to start next year. Because I look at the chemical makeup of this roster, and I believe I had St. John's 16. You've got Simeon Wilcher and Josan Sannon in terms of your guards, and you've got Hopkins and Ejiofor up front. If Rick Pitino can add 2 to 3 more capable perimeter players, I don't know if St. John's is going to win 31 games like it did last year, but St. John's will have a chance to be a more complete team because of depth, because of shooting, because of balance. So these are the players you want to keep an eye on right now for St. John's in the transfer portal. Ian Jackson from North Carolina, Isaiah Sellers from Stanford, an underrated shooter this year in the ACC, and Xavion Lee from Princeton, who is going to be heavily courted by a number of teams. Florida for sure. We were just talking about how the Gators need a guard, and you also can't count out Duke, who I expect to be active as well in the transfer portal with the resources that they have. But this is going to be a very interesting time to be a St. John's fan because the bar has been raised. And St. John's is a couple of players away from being a top 10, top 5, top 6 team in college basketball next year. Want to put a bow on this for everybody who stayed up late with us tonight. I have thoroughly enjoyed starting this new venture with CBS. We are going to get you information here in the off season about when we're going to be on. We're having some great conversations to bring you the best content in college basketball. As you can see, obviously, with what we've done already, we want to talk to the biggest names in the sport, and we want to be here for you, the college basketball fan, for you to vet your insights, your frustrations, and your concern. The 2025 college basketball season is over and done with. What a ride it's been. Look forward to talking to all of you in the off season. And remember, we sleep in May.